our employees in a position where, and sometimes it's just no win. And we have to figure out a way to get them out of that position because they're in the job for a different reason than we are. The next thing that I started uncovering was this notion of shortcuts. And what's really cool about shortcuts is when you get into how the human brain is wired, we're really, really efficient in a lot of stuff. But one of the things that we do that's necessary for us to function is also a disadvantage to us when it comes to serving customers. So let me give you a couple of examples and I'll show you what I mean. When you read the words on this screen, I'm going to find out you aren't reading every single letter. What you're doing is you're recognizing the familiar patterns presented by the words. So you've probably seen something on the internet, like researchers at Cambridge University uncovered, which by the way is a myth, which is kind of funny. Because that was one of the first places I looked. I went to Cambridge University. Where's that paper? And they're like, and by the way, if you're looking for this paper, no one wrote it. But other people have uncovered similar research, and they found that the way our brains process information so efficiently is by recognizing familiar patterns and making some sort of sense on those patterns. Now think about it from a customer service perspective, and let me give you a good example first. I want to show you something, and just tell me, can you read this? What does it say?
Here again.
Obvious, right?
Yeah.
Very clear. And this is the kind of judgment that our customer service representatives make. They see a familiar pattern, they make a judgment, they know the answer, they take action. But what if you're completely wrong? What if you made the judgment, so you suspended your investigation, you suspended your listening abilities because you saw a very familiar pattern even though you only saw half the picture? So this is a real example of what our customer service representatives go through. They see the pattern, they want to solve the problem, they jump in. And sometimes they're right, that's where their experience comes from. Sometimes though, we come out with this isn't good times are here again. I don't even know what this says. If anyone can, it's just a bunch of chaos, right? I'll give you another example. A lot of ads for customer service positions, one of the things we see in ads quite a bit is the ability to multitask, which is really interesting. So I want to share with you something about multitasking and just a little experiment that we're going to go through. We're going to see if we can get you to multitask and see how good all of you are. I mean, you must be very good, right? Because you're interested in customer service. So all I'm going to do is ask you to read the words on the screen out loud and just think to yourself how easy or difficult this is for you to do. So if you would, let's do it along with me and we'll just kind of get a sense for the pace. So start at the top. Red, blue, orange, green, black, purple. All right, so far so good, right? Nobody found that to be challenging? Don't raise your hand if you did. It's not supposed to be the hard part yet. Okay, so now we're doing the same thing. I'm going to put another set of words on the screen, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. I would like you to read the words that you see on the screen. We'll do it together. All right, so starting from the top. Green, purple, black, blue, orange, red. All right, was anybody confused? Any different than the first time?
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Just why was it a little different than the first time?
Because the color does not coordinate with the words.
So the pattern's broken a little bit, and our brain's trying to synthesize what's more important. I'm going to give you one more. What I'd like you to do this time, though, is rather than reading the word, I want you to say aloud the color of the word. And let's see how that works for you.
Red, blue, yellow, green, black, purple.
All right, so you're able to accomplish it. Everybody still did it okay. What was different this time?
We had to think.
You had to think.
Yeah.
You had to think. What's interesting is our brains are kind of like older computers in some ways. They're very, very efficient, but the one limitation is our brains can only process one conscious thought at a time. So when we're trying to make sense of a couple of different things simultaneously, like I'm seeing a word, the pattern's registering, I want to say purple. What my assignment is to say the color, our brain gets locked up just a little bit. Not much, but just a little bit. So what's interesting is the more variables, the more difficult we make the job, the more it slows people down, the more likely we are to make errors and make mistakes. So it's kind of interesting when you ask people to interface with customers and relate to them and understand their problems. there's some natural built-in challenges that are really great for a lot of different things, just not necessarily as good at connecting with customers. I'll give you the last one. This really isn't an experiment, but just another thing that I thought was interesting when I started doing research on empathy. So I'm sure you'd agree that empathy is an important customer service trait or skill. Well, come to find out, it seems obvious in hindsight, but empathy is tied to our ability to really be in the other shoes of the person we're serving. The challenge, though, is it becomes increasingly difficult if we haven't had the same experience or if we haven't had a similar experience. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So when you see this picture, who do you think this person is? Like, where are they working? What kind of job are they doing? Hotel. Oh, would you agree? Hotel. All right. What's interesting about most of the people that serve you in a hotel, especially nicer hotels, is many of them have never spent $150, $200 a night of their own money or their company's money to stay at that hotel. So by design, it's difficult for them to have empathy to understand your experience as a business traveler. They don't have that same experience. And there's a lot of other places where you see that. If you go to a sporting goods store, if you go to the Sports Authority or Sports Chalet, and you ask for the camping equipment section, you'll probably get someone who says, over there. If you go to REI and ask for the camping equipment section, you'll get someone who leads you there, and then the person working there is an avid camper. So they can empathize with you. They know what it's like, they can give you the right equipment, but if someone hasn't had that experience, it's just another product, it's just another service. Another example might be, I find myself having this conversation, a lot of my friends are starting to have children, and my wife and I, we're not at that point yet, but we still like to go to Disneyland. So you can have the same experience, but for different reasons, and now empathy gets broken as well. So my wife and I might say, we can't wait to go to Disneyland. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a good time. And our friends with kids are like, yeah, we're only going to Disneyland because of the kids. And we can't relate to that. We would say, but it's awesome. It's so much fun. No, it's not. Like, just avoid all the kids stuff and you'll have a great time. They're like, you don't understand. That's why we're going. Well, why don't you just leave the kids at home? It's probably cheaper than taking them with you. They're like, no, that's a complete disconnection. So empathy is difficult when you are working with employees if they haven't had that same experience. And one of the things that I found was really interesting in trying to tie all that together and figure out, well, what's the solution? I found that a lot of companies deliberately try to create these experiences of empathy with their employees by putting them in that position. So some hotels actually have their employees stay at that hotel or a similar hotel to have that experience. Some organizations will hire specifically for people who have not only the skill set but a passion for whatever they're doing. So some of the suggestions, one of the biggest things is we've become so adept at multitasking, we actually need to simplify things and make it easier for our employees to focus on one thing at a time. And some of my colleagues who've done work on some different generations will say that's really tough, especially with some of the younger generations. You have to be careful on how you do that, but what's happening is that we're getting people that generate a lot of activity, but they're not really solving our customers' problems, or they're not fully solving them. Another example there, I had stayed at a hotel recently, and I didn't get credit for all of my frequent guest points. So I sent a very simple email and said, hey, I didn't get credit for all my points, here are the details of my stay, would you please make the correction? Problems happen, easy, simple. Now what I know, and if some of you work in contact centers, you probably know this as well, the people who reply to those emails, they have shortcuts and they have forms and templates. So when they're writing you an email, they pick the right shortcut, and half the email's already written. And it usually starts with the same kind of platitudes, like, dear, valued, honorable, amazing customer, you're awesome and we love you and we're here at your beck and call to provide you with amazing service. And then they write their message, and then the closing part's already preformed. And we're always here for you, and we love you, and how you doing, and call us if you need anything else. So there's all these like customer service messages. And so I get the form email back from the person, and the body where they put their own message in, they said, yeah, you have to go contact the hotel about that. So there's this huge disconnect because the person's moving so fast and they're like one more email down, but really what you get is, you're a great customer, we don't care about your problems, and we're also here to serve you. And the part that she wrote was that we don't care about your problems, go bother somebody else. So the suggestion is simplify the approach, but be careful how you do that. It doesn't necessarily mean shortcuts. Simplify the approach or the steps they have to go to resolve problems for customers. Remove some of the obstacles. Now here's a weird one, but listening skills training. The first time I got a request for listening skills training, I was like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Do they have ears? All right, problem solved. Come to find out that we're not particularly good at listening to other people because of those shortcuts and some other barriers that I'm uncovering as I do some additional research. So you have to find ways with your employees to get them to slow down and really pay attention to the customer's message and not take that impulsive leap into understanding. And that's often where problems happen. They say, oh, good times are here again. They jump into that solution and they've missed the core of the problem. Because those of you who work directly with customers, you know that customers are notoriously poor storytellers. They never start with, here's my problem. They start with a bunch of information that's kind of peripheral to what they're trying to share with you. So it takes a trained ear to listen. And the last thing is, what we talked about earlier, is creating empathy experiences. Finding ways for your employees to clearly understand what it's like to be in your customer's shoes. And the last example I'll give you with this one is when you call for tech support, one of the reasons it's hard to get really good service in tech support is that person probably fixes their own computer. So they can't understand how someone can be so dumb that their computer will be broken with such a simple problem. If you don't create that empathy experience, that's the kind of service that will be conveyed. Even if you have a great script that says, dear honorable customer, we're very happy to serve you. You're an idiot. And if there's anything else we can do to help. So it's difficult because we're naturally wired. So that was the second thing that I uncovered, which I think was interesting, the shortcuts. So the third thing that I want to share with you is this notion of emotional roadblocks. And I always think this is interesting. I said earlier that this notion of don't take it seriously or don't take it personally is poor advice. And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I was traveling and I'm in line. I happened to arrive at the same time a lot of people arrived. There was a conference or a convention. So I'm at the hotel, waiting to check in, tired, long day. Everybody else is in line, tired, long day. And there was a gentleman at the counter. I don't know his name, so I'm just going to call him the Yeller. And the reason I'm going to call him the Yeller is because he was yelling. So that's just an easy nickname to come up with. But he was angry about something with his reservation, something with his room. He wasn't actually staying at the hotel, but he thought he was. And it was escalating and getting worse and worse. And it seemed, I wasn't trying to get involved, but it seemed like the associates behind the counter were really trying hard to placate him and come up with a solution. He was just getting more and more furious, and he started banging the counter very loudly and very emphatically saying, this is ridiculous, this is an outrage. Finally, the supervisor came out and was trying to talk to the guy and not getting anywhere. Meanwhile, all of us are standing in line because they've tied up all their resources, so none of us are checking in, so we're just watching this theater of the absurd. And finally, the supervisor comes around the counter and he's looking at all this growing line of people, and you can just see the embarrassment on his face. And he says to us, folks, I'm really sorry about this, but some people you just can't reason with. And it was at that point I think we all, like he was with us with the, I'm very sorry, and then, some people, Captain Yelly Pants over here. All of a sudden, like, we turned on him, right? But I know where that's coming from. He's embarrassed, he feels bad, etc. So I know where he's coming from, but it's difficult. And I started wondering when I was doing some of this research, why is it? And the answers, there's a lot of answers, but one of the most obvious answers is something you've probably heard of before. Have you ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy?
Yes.
So if you haven't heard of it, a psychologist, a guy named Maslow. By the way, if you invent something, you get to name it after yourself, which is kind of cool, so I'm working on it. But he's a psychologist that did work on what are the priorities as human beings? What do we need? And what's really interesting is at the very top, the fifth priority is self-actualization, being the best you that you can be. At the very bottom is your physiological needs, like air, food, water, the need to not be eaten by large animals. Like that's at the very bottom of the top, is being the best you can be. But look at the three in the middle. And think about what it might be like, and we've probably all been there, to be yelled at by a customer. So, esteem. That hits our core. If someone's yelling at us, and usually the attacks can become very, very personal. In this case, it was definitely very personal. That hits us right at self-esteem. Love and belonging is even more important than that. So our employees generally like to have